Welcome to the Sweep Baseball Podcast, where we talk all the happenings from the past week in college baseball. The big storyline I want to start things off with is another Tony V little tantrum. Happens every year. It feels like he gets his time to shine, his moment in the spotlight, where he decides to go all out and get ejected from the game. And this time decided to tirade not just one umpire, but go around the entire diamond and take a turn on each one, which is pretty, I don't know. It seemed like a just so convoluted to me at this point. Like, sure, whatever, blow off some steam, try to get your team some momentum back. Um, in the series, they were struggling against what was a team they should beat at home in Auburn, and that just wasn't really going their way at all. But to go around the entire diamond and yell at each umpire individually just seemed like he was putting on a show and making it all about himself, which I think there have been a few like similar instances where it just feels like he's blowing it out of proportion, and I think this is just another one where it's just the same old, where it's just feels like from an outside perspective of not a fan of Tennessee. I mean, I would like to think that I'm somewhat neutral, but everybody has their gripes with Tennessee if you're not a direct fan of them. And this is just another one of those instances where I don't know. It just feels a little too much.
Yeah, I feel like there's a time and a place to. I mean, it feels like every coach has that game in a season where they do just go all out and get ejected. But going around to each individual umpire is a little unnecessary, and I feel like we just see it with Tennessee's program in general the last couple of years, just taking it that extra step. Um, I personally love when games get chippy. It's entertaining. Love when guys are playing with energy and there is like a little bit of trash talk here and there. Love that competitive fire, but it just seems like Tennessee takes it a step too far uh, every season in some way, whether it's flipping off pitchers while you're rounding the bases, or we saw this weekend shoving a player after a rundown. Tony V yelling at each individual umpire. It just seems like they take it to an unnecessary level, and it doesn't feel like it's natural competitive energy. It's kind of just for show, and it feels not authentic, and yeah, it's just a little much.
Yeah, I think like a few years ago when they were like the consensus number one team, when they were just running through and they had their moments of just over the top, but it kind of felt like they were buying into being the, villain of that year, right? And now it seems like they're just like trying to continue that vibe throughout like over certain years when maybe it just, doesn't really feel like they're that team anymore, especially when you're, not dominating everyone and it seems just kind of like cheap shots, and especially with like, yeah, the Liam Doyle shove, it's just like so unnecessary at that point. It's like, all right, you got the out. Maybe like you can trash talk him a little bit, whatever. That's normal. But to like shove him and the bench is clear, that's all fun. But from an outside perspective, obviously it brings some energy to the game and brings up talking points for people to go on about on Twitter or whatnot to fire up fan bases. But I feel like it's not, yeah, like you said, not always coming from the right spot, at least yeah, from our perspective. But from there, I think, yeah, I mean, do you have anything else to add to this conversation?
No, I mean I feel like it also may just be coming from a point of frustration for Tennessee now. That's their third straight home series they've lost. They don't have an easy end to the year either. So this is a program that was easily the number one team in the country for first month or so of the season, just absolutely dominating. And since then they've been stumbling a bit. So it'll be interesting to see if they're able to get on the right track. But I don't feel like they're channeling that energy in the right way.
Yeah, for sure. The next talking point that I want to bring up is we're having a little bit of beef with NCBWA. The Writers Association poll, their top 25 rankings is just abysmal. A few years ago, I always made fun of collegiate baseball. That is now a defunct organization. They're gone. So now it's all eyes on the NCBWA. just feels like they have no idea what they're doing with their rankings. The past 2 weeks have just been ridiculous. Just running through this week, at least, seeing Oregon State drop like they did after last week when they lost their home series, or lost the series on the road to Oregon, not moving at all from that 3 spot, now dropping all the way down to 9. It just feels like they're a week behind. We can talk similarly with teams like UC Irvine now going up from last week when they lost their series this past weekend. Auburn going down after beating Tennessee on the road. Ridiculous. But then you can also flip it on its head and be like, well, some of these changes make sense for this week when you're looking at Arkansas jumping all the way up from 1, but they didn't move back last week after they lost. Doesn't make sense really there. And then looking at like a team like Tennessee also went down. So both Tennessee and Auburn, they played each other. One team probably should go up. That would be Auburn in this instance. Both team going down. I just think it's ridiculous that a poll that is recognized so firmly as one of the, places to look for college baseball rankings is just throwing out absolute stinkers like this the past few weeks. It's ridiculous. It feels like they're a week behind in some areas, but not overall. Seems like maybe they need like confirmation from other polls from the previous week about where their ranking changes need to be, but obviously it's from writers, so it's like it's not people agreeing with each other to put out this poll. It's coming from all over the place. So I just don't understand these changes. You can also look at NC State. They weren't ranked last week after beating Clemson, and now they're jumping all the way up to 20 or 19 after losing their series 2 games to Miami. Is just, I don't know what to say. It's ridiculous for a nationally recognized poll to make errors like this consistently the past few weeks. It just has to be, put out there, and this needs to be confronted in some way or another.
Yeah, NC State was also the team I was going to bring up. An 0-3 week altogether and moving up 6 spots. It's just something you never see, especially at the back end of the ranking. And NC State's not a team that's had a super consistent season, so that's not a team you're rewarding for having a great overall resume or anything. But yeah, just complete inconsistencies across the board. Some of the movements are due to this past week. Some of them are the week prior, like you said, and them like making last second adjustments after they didn't move them the week before. Doesn't make any sense, and there's just no consistency. So not sure why it's recognized as the rankings at this point.
Yeah, I mean, like, I feel like previous years, no issues. Even like before the past few weeks, no real issues. They were pretty consistent with other polls. I think they had like McNeese, which that was the weird instance where no other polls had McNeese ranked, and they had him jump in for 1 week and drop out the next week after losing a series. But yeah, I don't know. It seems like they had it all figured out, and then all of a sudden it went up in smoke. Like people didn't turn in their top 25s in time or something, so they just kind of went with the same top 25 as the previous week, last week, and now they're just trying to catch up in weird ways which don't make sense at all. But yeah, that's all I have to say on that. It's ridiculous for a nationally recognized poll to just throw out absolute crap for the past few weeks.
Yeah, hopefully hopefully the NCAA and Warren Nolan start recognizing the sweep instead.
Yeah, I mean, what can we say? At least we're consistent with what we're doing. We just put out heaters week in, week out. And talking about that, we can now flip to the next page and speak on our top 25 a little bit. I think the main headline, Texas staying in that number 1 spot, might be a little controversial. I think they just had such a big gap before this week to the next few teams, and especially because the teams right after them didn't have amazing weeks overall, that everything got a lot tighter. And I think you can see that in other polls too, where Texas was just dominating. They had every first place vote, and now it's kind of split all over the place. Some have Texas, some have Florida State, even Georgia, I believe, Arkansas maybe. But we had Arkansas dropping back pretty heavily the past few weeks just because they had a pretty bad run there, I believe, losing 3 straight weekend series. So we're jumping them back up a decent amount after looking like the team to beat. I mean, when Arkansas puts it all together, like they look like they could be the national champion. And I've heard this from multiple different places where when Arkansas is playing their best, there is no team better than them, and I do agree with that. When their offense is clicking like it has, and they have the pitching talent that was their main staple the past few years, and they consistently keep rebuilding and not really rebuilding, but reloading in their pitching staff. But the offense had been lacking the past few years, and with it being one of the best offenses in the SEC, maybe in the country now, it's a team to be reckoned with, and so we jump them all the way back up to 5. They obviously have one of the best records in the country still, and I believe they're the first team to 40 wins, so they deserve to be in a top 5 spot, maybe even higher. But because we had them dropping back a decent amount, it's tough to bring them all the way back up, and they did have their struggles the past few weeks.
Yeah, to me, it felt like going into this previous week, it was still Texas and Clemson with the best overall resumes. Clemson had just dropped their first series. Texas still hadn't dropped one, and it feels like it's the right thing to do to leave Texas there in that one spot. First series loss of the season. There's not many teams that can say they only have one series loss, and although they did get swept, and it was the first time they've had a tough road test, and they didn't really live up to the expectations. Still, just the overall resume, it's one of the best in the country, and I still think they're deserving of that number 1 spot. I think Arkansas could have reclaimed that if they hadn't just dropped 3 series in a row. If it was maybe 3 of their last 4 or 2 of their last 3, maybe they jump back into that number 1 spot. And I would agree that when they're clicking on all cylinders, that's the scariest team in the country. They have the star power, and that team seems to always have the pitching. It seems like they're getting healthier now, and if that pitching staff is rolling, it's hard not to see them as the favorites moving forward.
Yeah, for sure. And I think staying in the SEC, talking about Auburn, really impressive road win versus Tennessee after the first game. A little bit of controversy as well with how it played out, with it getting delayed and pushed back to the next day after. Liam Doyle had already started his outing and gave up a few runs, so pretty much took him out from being a starter on that weekend, which is it's tough to overcome, obviously, for Tennessee, and they were able to bring him back in the bullpen for one of those games and shut down a win there. But Auburn just outplayed Tennessee for the most part. Pretty much every aspect of the game, they looked like the better team, which is surprising considering that we had Tennessee in that upper echelon of the SEC for a very long time, and it seemed like they were one of the best teams in the country, and they just have not proved it recently. And it looks like you're right now on picking Tennessee as one of the teams to really fade this year. It looked like a bad prediction halfway through the season, but now coming to the back end, this Tennessee team is definitely underperforming, and maybe it is just the lack of experience that we thought they had coming into the season that is biting them in the butt now, and Auburn took full advantage. Tennessee has one of the best home environments, but they have one of the worst home records in the SEC right now, if you're looking at SEC versus SEC competition. They're most of the time you can pretty much write off a top 10, 15 team. If they're at home, they're probably going to take the series in the SEC. That's just what's happened pretty consistently over the past few years, and especially at Tennessee. But that is not the case this year. There have been a lot of upsets with A&M, Auburn winning there, Kentucky winning there now. Like it's just a lot of series losses at home that typically don't happen in the SEC, and especially at Tennessee.
Yeah, this Auburn team is a really interesting one. Super impressive series win, but you just look at like the overall record. It's not that impressive. 33-15, tied for the most losses in our top 25, and we have them all the way up in the top 10 now. The SEC record is just 13-11, not super impressive. But if you look into it, they've played the second toughest strength of schedule in the entire country. They're not playing Missouri. They're playing all the top teams in the SEC. And they've got some super impressive series wins now. On the road at Tennessee, they have a sweep over LSU, series win over Vandy as well. So they're racking up these super impressive series wins. And, we love teams that live up to the moment and play well when the lights are the brightest. And it seems like Auburn has been doing that.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, luckily Auburn has South Carolina, I believe, this week, so they have the opportunity, if they take full advantage, to rack up some wins here as one of the 2 bottom dwellers. Obviously, it's not Missouri, but South Carolina is definitely second I mean, obviously second worst in the conference, and by a far margin there with only 5 wins right now. So yeah, it's an interesting year with the SEC having just so many at least decent teams, and then just two absolute bottom dwellers that are just kind of propping everybody up potentially. Who knows? The SEC might get a ton of teams in the postseason here because there are just two teams pretty much losing every single game, and that just kind of props everybody up. Who knows? Maybe the SEC is just that good, especially all those teams besides the bottom two. But it also could just be a fact of just getting a lot of free wins there because of those two teams. But I think staying in the SEC one last time, we'll talk about a team that dropped out, maybe undeserving. We have Alabama dropping out of our top 25 from that 21 spot. They've lost, like 4 series in a row, something like that, or 4 of 5, 5 of 6. Just too many. It's been like a full month since they've won a series, and they really should have won that series versus Vandy this week. They choked that final game there. I mean, there's not much more to say. Good job on Vandy for showing up when it mattered most in the final few innings and putting up a lot of runs to overcome and eventually, take the series versus Alabama. But Alabama should be kicking themselves right now. That is a series that would have looked really good on their resume. Vanderbilt, even though we have them in the back end of the top 25, they have a top 5, I believe, RPI. So that can really boost you up, especially on the road for Alabama. That would have done wonders for their RPI and put them in hosting consideration if they're able to flip the script like that. Not able to do that, and Vanderbilt maybe gets lucky here, but they continue to prove it at home at least, where they win pretty much all their series.
Yeah, I really felt like Alabama should have had that one. Multiple opportunities to close that out in the Sunday game. But Alabama still has opportunity. 13 in the RPI right now. At home against Georgia this weekend, who's number 1 in the RPI right now. And Georgia has pretty bad home and away splits. They have not played well on the road. So if Alabama's able to take advantage there, win their last 2 series, you probably see them climb back in the rankings. Their overall record and SEC record is still good, even though they've lost all those series in a row. They keep managing to win one of those games at least. So keeping the record up a little bit. And if they finish strong, they're right back in hosting conversation since the RPI is right there.
Yeah, this Alabama team was really firing on all cylinders before conference play started. Even, through the first few weeks, they were looking pretty decent, looking like potentially a top 10 team. And yeah, with that just stretch as of late, really fallen off, but yeah, have a lot of opportunity to jump back in. They're probably at that 26 spot for me right now, right on the outside looking in. I just think there is just a little bit of a gap with some of these other teams that have gotten hot late that are definitely making a move to push into the top 25, but just aren't quite there yet. But we'll talk about the other team dropping out is Louisville again. They're just pogoing in and out of the top 25 here. They might need a little break for a while. At this point, we brought them back in last week, even though they went 2-2. They go 2-2 again, but lose the weekend series at Notre Dame, which at this point, if you want to be a top 25 team, you should be taking that series. Notre Dame putting themselves in a place where they are probably could be making the postseason now with how well they've played recently, but for a team like Louisville, who's shown their potential against some of the top teams in the conference and in the country, to lose a series on the road, especially after going 2-2 last week and bringing them into the top 25, can't really do that, especially since they were at that 25 spot.
Yeah, it's tough to navigate those 2-2 weeks when you're at the back end of the top 25 there, and you're seeing Louisville get adjusted accordingly, hopping in and out there. But back out now, and yeah, it's just a tough one going against Notre Dame as well. Not one of the top teams in the ACC this season. And Louisville seems like they had potential to try and move into that top tier of the ACC with some of those teams dropping series recently, but yeah, just not able to take advantage of those opportunities they had in front of them. And yeah, kind of just hit or miss this year, which we've seen with a lot of teams at this point, especially the last couple of weeks.
Yeah, for sure. And now talking about things a little bit brighter, on the brighter side of things, we'll talk about the teams that we did bring in at 24 and 25, and that is UTSA and USC. This was an interesting week. It didn't feel like there was any team that jumped off the page as a team to bring into the top 25, but with a few of the teams at the back struggling, felt like they deserved to drop out. So the teams that, are able to take advantage of that opportunity are UTSA, who has just been really, really consistent recently. Only have 10 losses. They were 4-0 the past week, all on the road. Yeah, and they've been in our mentions for a while of teams to potentially jump in at some point, and they, take advantage of this opportunity here.
Yeah, I mean, UTSA, we've mentioned it pretty much every week for the last month, just on the outside looking in. They've won 12 of their last 13, and you just continue to win games when you're a mid-major like that. Eventually, you'll be able to work your way in after some teams drop out, and finally they got their opportunity here. And yeah, they've just been taking care of business and getting rewarded accordingly.
Yeah, and similarly, USC has been very hot as of the past 2 months, pretty much. It feels like, I mean, most of the season they've been a pretty good team. They just had one bad week where they racked up a bunch of losses, got swept by Oregon, but that is their only weekend loss. So besides that, winning the series versus UCLA this past week, even though it technically was at home, none of their home games are really at home. They don't have a stadium right now with some rebuilding going on, so they still have to bus to whatever game. So pretty much neutral, especially against a team like UCLA, where their home fans could probably show up to the same amount as USC could. But yeah, just really impressive. They weren't necessarily on our radar for a while, but you can't really look past the resume that they've put forward, and just another one of the West Coast schools in the Big Ten that is pretty much dominating the conference.
Yeah, like you mentioned, they've won every single series since dropping that very first series of conference play. Got swept and lost 6 games in a row at that point, and so that kind of sets you back and out of the picture for a while. But they've continued to take care of business and haven't dropped a series since. So, continue to win those weekend series, and you find your way in here just like with UTSA.
Yep, definitely. Any other teams to mention in our top 25?
I don't think so.
Sweet. Well, we'll move to the teams right on the outside looking in. Like previously mentioned, Alabama, Louisville. I think Alabama's right there. Louisville might take a few weeks for them to flip things back onto the top 25. But other teams outside of that, I think Miami and Florida, I think, are in a very similar boat to USC. Just have a little bit worse records overall, but both teams have looked very good recently. Especially Miami, they have put themselves in a potential spot to host if they can keep this momentum going, which was not the case at all to start the year. They looked like a pretty bad Miami team. They had a few good weeks, but for the most part, they were pretty much dropping all their series at the start of the year, and that has been a complete 180 turn to what's going on right now. And Florida's the same. It's in the SEC. It's going to be tough no matter what, but they're able to rack up wins recently and get some solid series wins, and sweeping South Carolina on the road this past week. Obviously a bottom dweller there in the conference, but a sweep's a sweep, and that's still better than Missouri. So, yeah, I mean, both these teams right on the outside looking in, kind of similar spot to USC, I think.
Yeah, a team I would loop in with these two also is Texas A&M. They've just picked up some big-time series wins since they've gotten hot. Series wins now over Arkansas, LSU, Tennessee, 3 teams that have been at the top of the rankings throughout this year. Tennessee not now, but LSU, Arkansas still top 10 series wins right now. And they have a series coming up against Missouri, so should be 3 free wins hypothetically. And that should help them out with that overall SEC record. Usually if you get to 13, 14 wins, you're feeling pretty safe. And so this weekend against Missouri should get them there. And yeah, that's going to be a scary team heading into postseason here, especially with how we're seeing them do against these top teams.
Yeah, for sure. I think the only thing that sets them back a little bit is their results versus Texas, but that series was very competitive. Just getting swept is always a blemish on the hot streak, but they definitely are still way up there in just how their momentum is going in comparison to how it was in the past. But some mid-majors to talk about. We got Northeastern, only 9 losses. Don't have amazing competition to face, but dominating their conference. Also, Western Kentucky, we had them ranked a few weeks ago. Uh, they're turning things back around. Great week, 4-0 versus Kentucky and Louisiana Tech. So that's what you want to see out of a team that showed that they were a little bit vulnerable and dropped back a lot in the RPI because they lost to FIU a few weeks ago. Real disappointing. They don't really have a margin for error now to make the postseason, so can't slip up from here on out. But they did everything they could the past few, at least last week, and yeah, it's definitely at least tightening it up to making it back into the top 25 at some point.
Yeah, just gotta continue to take care of business. That was a solid series win there, but yeah, getting swept the week before is a tough one. It's just something you can't really afford as a mid-major most of the time, unless you're playing, another team that's around the top 25, and that just wasn't the case here. But overall, the season's been impressive. Kind of a similar boat to UTSA, overall record-wise and overall performance. So certainly a team on the outside looking in, and we'll see if they're able to get back in there and hang on enough with that RPI to still get in the tournament.
Yeah, definitely. And a few other teams to mention. Georgia Tech, been out of it for a while. They had a few bad weeks there, but turned it around, went 3-0 versus Western Carolina. So at least getting on the right track, even though it was against lesser competition. Teams that maybe are dropping back a little bit more. We got TCU and Kansas in the Big 12. Both had bad weeks, with Kansas getting swept versus Cincy, and now Cincy getting put in a spot where they could potentially make the tournament, at least make a run if they have that ability to keep things going there. And TCU losing at Arizona, tough one. We went out against a ranked opponent, and it was always going to be tough to play there. It's really a tough stadium to play at, just crazy dimensions, especially with the Arizona heat. But yeah, besides that, those are pretty much the teams that I have right on the outside looking in. Anything from you?
Yeah, I think that's most of it. I also have Duke as a team, to kind of have in there. Another team that's just kind of had a roller coaster of a season, but still talented, still has a lot of potential, and they've started to play a little better down the stretch the last month or so. They do have some good series wins, so just a team to keep on the radar.
Yeah, definitely. Well, with that, we can jump into our top play of the week.
He'll have to face 1, 2, 3 in the Northwestern lineup as McElpatrick will bat that one deep into right center field. Going back on his Rogers, going to the track. Did he catch it? Yes, he did! What a catch by Brandon Rogers! Scurrying back to first is Mills. That is an unbelievable play by the Purdue center fielder.
So there we had center fielder Brandon Rogers for Purdue sprinting back, jumping into the wall, and face planting to make the catch. Splatting like a bug there. Really impressive stuff. Just no regard for his safety. Going full speed to catch that ball. That's what you want to see out of your center fielder and a leader. And yeah, really impressive stuff to hold on to that ball at least.
Yeah, just incredible commitment to the catch. I mean, we've seen a lot of great home run robberies this year, and this one is one of the better catches we've seen at the wall. Just full speed into it, and yeah, he really crumpled, but props to him for hanging on to it.
Yeah, and he got the ball back into the infield pretty quickly too, so that's what matters most importantly. But now going to our player of the week, which was Joseph Jerwa out of Michigan State, not Mississippi State, very different. MSU, you can't mix that up. But 9 innings pitched, complete game, 3 hits, 11 strikeouts, 0 runs, given up to an Oregon team whose offense has really been clicking recently. Completely shut them down on Friday night. Really good pitchers duel between both sides, with Grayson Grinsell also having a really good performance, going complete game as well, but giving up a few runs there. So yeah, this was very solid, just pitchers duel, and Jerwa coming up on top here is just you can't look past it against one of the best offenses in the country.
Yeah, I mean, that's exactly the type of game you're looking for when you're having a Friday pitchers duel. 2 of the best pitchers in the country there, specifically for the lefties. I mean, that could be the 2 best lefties in the country right there, certainly in contention. And yeah, super impressive, like you mentioned, especially considering the offense he was facing. Oregon has been been hot offensively. They have the home run leader in Mason Neville, and so impressive to hold them to a 0 there on Friday night.
Yep, definitely. And now flipping to our series predictions from the previous week. Little bit of a dud from what we've been seeing recently. We still went 500 this past week. I went 2-3, Kevin 3-2. We just had a few misses with that UCLA series, especially since we both picked them and USC came out on top. Kind of surprisingly, maybe not surprisingly, but all the home teams won this week from our predictions. I think, yeah, we mentioned it last week. Texas had it coming eventually. I just couldn't look past what they've put up throughout the season. So getting that one wrong, maybe stings a little bit. It felt like it was going to go Arkansas's way, just how everybody was talking about it, especially with the injuries that Texas had been going through. But yeah, I just had to stick with the boys in Austin for one last ride, and now we know that they are susceptible to losing some games, especially on the road against tough competition. But besides that, not a terrible week overall. Still racking up those wins. Very positive. You're one game behind now in total, so still keeping it very close, and yeah, a lot better records than we've had previous years.
Yeah, cut that differential from 2-1. So 2 weeks to go in that regular season. We'll see if I'm able to get one more back and have us tied up heading into the postseason. That would make for a exciting home stretch there.
I mean, even with it being this close, last year
Yeah.
there was a very wide margin that built up late in the season that made it so the predictions pretty much meant nothing going into the final stretch of the season. But yeah, now no matter what, we have our preseason predictions still to come to fruition, and yeah, there's a lot more games to get through, especially with all the regionals, super regionals, all those predictions to come.
Yeah, last year I was definitely playing catch up, and that just snowballed into countering every pick, and that's not a great strategy for actually trying to build a good record.
Yeah, especially since what the weeks that we've gone both 4-1, we've had a lot of the same picks, and yeah, if you decide to go off the beaten path and take maybe the upsets more often, that might turn out great, but has a very large chance of just going the complete opposite direction, which did happen last year.
Yeah, so we'll see if we can lock it in and keep these records up, close out the year.
Yep, for sure. And now looking at the upcoming series, this next week we have I think at least one heavy hitter. I think the main one, Arkansas at LSU, number 5 team at the number 7 right now. With Arkansas turning things around at home, we'll see if they can continue that momentum on the road. It's always tough to do in the SEC, especially at the box. But yeah, it could go either way. Both these teams have the potential to be the top team in the nation. It just depends on who shows up on their day. But this will be a very exciting series to watch.
Yeah, definitely a big one, and yeah, kind of a weaker weekend for SEC matchups, it seems. A couple ranked matchups towards the lower end, but not as many high-profile ones. And but this one's certainly a big one, and we'll see if Arkansas is able to, power through this end stretch and completely flip the script from those 3 weeks they lost in a row right before this.
Yeah, definitely. And I think the other main SEC matchup, I guess there are a few, but Vanderbilt at Tennessee, huge one for the in-state rivalry. For some reason in my notes I had Vanderbilt at Duke. So it's not the series that is going on. It's Vanderbilt at Tennessee. With Tennessee not really having a home field advantage, it seems like this year. Well, who knows what'll happen there? But we have them at 18 and 19 respectively. So maybe there was a little bit of fuel to put their rankings that close for this matchup, but yeah, it should be exciting no matter what. I mean, Vandy hasn't been great on the road, but that's just typical SEC.
Yeah, Vandy hasn't been great on the road, but Tennessee has not been great at home, so we'll see who's able to defy their habits so far. And yeah, big in-state matchup there, and yeah, it just feels like if Vanderbilt wins this one, that would be incredibly deflating for Tennessee and the locker room. Losing 4 straight home series, that's just pretty impressive given the talent on that roster and how they started this year. So uh, hopefully it doesn't come to that for their sake, but I would love to see that and them continue to live up to the most overrated team of the season.
Well, I'd have to, go to the other side of the coin here. I'd take a Tennessee win here. They're bad at home, but they still beat a terrible Vanderbilt team. Some people predict them every year to be not as good as the projection, but apparently the RPI thinks otherwise about Vanderbilt. But I'm still, staying on. We'll use this as a prediction. I can kind of already predict how things are, who's going to take which team for this series potentially. But besides that, another SEC series, Georgia at Alabama, even though Alabama's no longer ranked, right on the outside looking in, have a very, very good opportunity to jump right back into the top 20, most likely, if they can beat Georgia here, especially since Georgia has not been super impressive on the road. Like we mentioned, it's the SEC, so it's always going to be tough, but the offense just looks like a completely different team when they're playing on the road, and even the past few weeks at home hasn't just been as explosive as we saw the first half of the season. So we'll see if they can turn it back a little bit, but yeah, maybe Alabama will be definitely looking for some redemption here after choking that series versus Vanderbilt last week.
Yeah, Georgia 9-8 on the road this year. See if they're able to lock in and take a ranked road series win here. I do think Georgia is the better team here. That's reflected in the rankings, obviously, but I feel like Georgia has one of the highest ceilings in the entire country. I feel like honestly might be up there with Arkansas for me as the top 2 teams in the country when they're at their peak this season. Certainly in conversation there. They just haven't really showed that consistency as of late. And I'd love to see them pull that off on the road and get hot as we go down the stretch here.
Yep, for sure. And I think another series to mention, rivalry series, NC State at UNC. Even though NC State has dropped back a little bit recently as the 23 spot right now in our rankings, they did just beat Clemson a few weeks ago, so can't look past that. They have the ability to beat top teams. Might be tough on the road versus a rival here, but you never know what happens in rivalry series. So much can happen, and especially since North Carolina did not play a weekend series last week, who knows, they could be a little rusty coming back. But it's, most likely people are going to take North Carolina in this instance. It's just tough to look past. We have them at number 2. Maybe that's a little high, but they haven't really slipped up recently, so that's the reason they're so high in the rankings. But yeah, NC State, if they aren't able to win this series, they definitely have the potential to drop back out of the top 25.
Yeah, these teams are pretty far apart in the rankings, with North Carolina at 2, NC State at 23 now, but both have the same amount of wins in the ACC so far, both sitting at 15 conference wins. So the series is pretty important to, shape up those standings at the end of the year. As much as RPI and overall record, matter into who's hosting, who's not, who gets in, who's not. A lot of times it does matter where you finish in your conference as well, especially when you're in one of those top conferences like the ACC, SEC. They do look at how you finished, what order those teams finished in, and that plays a part. So super important, especially for a team like NC State, who's dropped in the RPI this past week, back end of the top 25. Not in great hosting position necessarily, but they're able to win 2 out of 3 here, move up the ACC pecking order. I'd say they're right back in the mix.
Yeah, they lost a lot of momentum this past week, but still have a lot out in front of them to play for, especially with the conference tournament. Never know what happens there for boosting up the RPI, but not really any huge series left to mention. I would say maybe Oregon State versus Iowa. It's technically a neutral site, even though it is in the state of Iowa still. So seems like a great way for Iowa to go around the RPI a little bit, skirt around the rules by keeping it in the same state, but technically it being a neutral site, so it could definitely boost their RPI if they're able to even get one win versus Oregon State here because it's a neutral site game. But it's going to be tough. Iowa did just lose the series on the road to Washington, but still in a great spot overall to win the conference. Obviously, this is not a conference series here, but still could mean a lot for both teams. Oregon State still vying to host, and Iowa wants to establish themselves as a team to make the postseason even at this point, even though they're pretty much, I wouldn't say guaranteed to win the conference, but it's pretty close to being a lock at this point.
Yeah, it would take a pretty big slip up for Iowa not to win the conference. It would probably take them getting swept in the last weekend against Oregon, but this is a big one against Oregon State here. Yeah, it's pretty rare that you see a team in one of these bigger conferences that looks like they're going to win the regular season title and not really locked in the playoff picture. RPI sitting at 66. That's very fringe. If they were not atop the conference standings, they would be out by a decent amount here, especially just given their strength of schedule. They haven't played a lot of the top teams, especially considering the top teams in the Big Ten this year, mostly out west. And, not all the teams in the Midwest, East Coast are playing all four of those teams on the West Coast. So they're only playing a couple there. And so super big series for them. You don't want to drop 3 series in a row to end the season as well. Coming off that UW series loss, they have a fringe RPI and have 3 series losses in a row. I don't think there's a chance they get in on.
Yeah, I think this does bring up the point of the new just massive conferences where teams like, that face in the SEC, Missouri, or even South Carolina get just boosted wins. So it's maybe makes winning a conference just less important overall now, especially with conference tournaments for most conferences at this point. It's like all the Big Four have conference tournaments, so it's just tough with how different schedules can play out. With a team like Iowa, they have a terrible RPI, but dominated most of the conference, right? Because they didn't face a few of the top teams, especially, the West Coast teams, like you mentioned. But UCLA, in second place, has a hosting RPI, which is just drastically different and, maybe puts a little bit more emphasis on non-conference games, especially for teams not in the SEC or ACC. I think those two have kind of a different look on things. But even for them, your record in conference could be a little bit, just skewed because of some of the bottom dwellers, especially this year. But, who knows what happens next year with how things go in different conferences. Like the ACC doesn't really have that bottom of the barrel as some other conferences might have. But who knows? Maybe next year they do. And then a bunch of other ACC teams can make the tournament because their records are boosted and their RPIs are a little bit better because of that. So it puts into perspective how, I don't know, I would say the huge conferences now with the Power Four is a little bit detrimental and puts everything into a little different perspective of winning a conference now. But, still, there could be scenarios where, a team wins a conference and they had a super hard resume, but it does lead to more teams just getting an easier resume in conference to help out their record.
Yeah, it's just difficult with the big conferences. Not everybody's playing everybody. And so when you compare those conference records, you're not really comparing apples to apples all the times. These teams have different strength of schedules. Like you mentioned, UCLA right near the top of the Big Ten as well. They have the toughest strength of schedule out of all the teams in the Big Ten, and they're still performing that well. So that's why you see them with a hosting RPI, whereas Iowa is doing it against one of the worst schedules in the conference. And so although it's impressive that they continue to win all these games, they do have a very impressive conference record. It's just been against a weak schedule, and that's not necessarily in their control. It's not in their control at all what their conference schedule is. So they've done well against what's been put in front of them, but like you mentioned, it does put an emphasis on what you're doing in that non-conference, especially if you're not in the ACC, SEC, where you're going to get boosted throughout the conference play regardless.
Yeah, for sure. Any other series this weekend to mention from you?
The one other one I would mention is West Virginia at Kansas State. West Virginia, the least losses in the country, I believe, at this point. 39-7 overall record. But another one of those teams that just hasn't played great competition throughout the year. The toughest team they've played in the Big 12 so far is Arizona, number 13 on our rankings, and they dropped that series. So playing Kansas State and Kansas these last 2 weeks, two of the better teams in the conference. It'll be interesting to see how they do against some of that tougher competition. I still see them likely taking both of those series, at least one of them, as they've continued to play really well throughout the entire year and win what's in front of them. But it's one of those things where you want to see them do it against the good competition as well. And since they failed that test against Arizona, it's time for them to show that they do have that in them.
Yeah, and I think if they're able to win those series, that puts them in a spot to definitely be a host and maybe even a top 8 seed if they can prove it against at least decent competition, which they just haven't faced most of the year. But if they can do it, especially on the road here coming up, this will be huge. They have a very good road record, but it was against pretty measly competition for most of the year. But have an opportunity to definitely take advantage of that now and prove that they are the team that their record shows that they are. But besides that, pretty long one today. We can wrap it up here, but yeah, good stuff. Appreciate everybody tuning in, and we'll see you soon next week for the next edition of the Sweep Baseball Podcast. Peace.